everyone. A very warm welcome to another exciting episode of Psychology Talks. And today we're going to discuss, which is very important part of our life, is relationships, right? And why relationships fail and how to save them. The numbers actually doesn't say very good figure or doesn't paint a good picture because like it says that almost 50% of the marriages end up in divorce or in a broken relationship. Like when people start their relationship, of course they don't intend to end this in a broken relationship. Most of the time studies suggest that there is the reason behind those breakage or those broken relationship is not those the big issues. It's usually the small silent issues that slowly erode the connection. And that's why I have invited our guest today, Mr. Bryan Power. He is the relationship expert and the founder of MYRF. He is his own journey gives him this rare perspective on love and resilience. And he has the childhood where he grew up with difficulties with a single mom, and this trauma led him to face some difficulties in the relationship, and but he overcame, and that's why now he's on the mission to help other people to save their relationship. So let's welcome Bryan. Thank you so much for joining today.
And Bryan, thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm excited to be here. I love what you're doing, and just to be a part of this is fantastic. So thanks for having me today.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's truly an honor to have you with us. And because this topic is really something that I believe that a lot of people need to hear, and a lot of people need advice on this. So before any further ado, let's start and dive into the discussion. So actually, I gave a very little brief introduction about you. Just tell us about yourself.
Yeah, it was brief, but you're pretty spot on. So yeah, I mean, I kind of grew up in the early 70s. Really, I was born in 1969 to my mom, who my brother was already around. So it was my brother and I. My mom was 21 years old, and shortly
Hmm.
after I was born, my parents would split for good and get divorced. My father battled addiction, and so throughout the 70s, my single mom, kind of raised us. We moved around a lot. There was a lot of, as you can imagine, some craziness going on there. She was trying to find herself and everything else. So a lot of instability, a lot of, craziness going on as a child, and not the kind of childhood that you really want to have to really kind of provide stability and everything else. So that was the foundation of my life in the beginning, right? And so what I found out is that would really set a tone for the rest of my life and how things would play out into my adult life, and eventually, with my wife and how things would play out in 2024, where we went from having a pretty good relationship to having a lot of our childhood traumas play out in a pretty combative way, to the point where I would ultimately have a restraining order against me. The relationship would basically end. But then again, I found some really great tools and some things that would help me put it all back together. And now today we're blessed on the other side of that for some of the things we went through. But that's kind of in a nutshell how it all kind of played out and how we landed here today with you. So.
Yeah, I mean that's inspiring also that you had your own traumas, you had your own difficulties and challenges, yet you overcame them. So just tell us a bit more about your journey. That what were the problems you were facing, what challenges you faced, and how you overcame those challenges.
Yeah, so I would say in 2024, my wife and I had what I would call a pretty good relationship. We had some minor fights and stuff, but never seemed too serious. We got along great. There was never really financial issues. There was no real drug addiction. There was no infidelity or anything like that were, glaringly, problematic. A lot of our fights were just, a lot of times it was parenting styles and, maybe a little this, a little that. But overall, again, I thought a pretty good relationship. But early in 2024, we had a disagreement about parenting again. And
Mhm.
that little fight kind of pushed us a little bit further. She challenged me to then get some therapy. And I decided, okay, I'm willing to do that. But I also feel like you need to probably get some therapy as well, because it's never us, right? It's always the other person that has the problem. And so that's what I was thinking at the time, is like, okay, you're the one that has the problem. And she's, of course, thinking I have the problem. But we both decided to get some therapy, and that was a good thing. So that was definitely helpful. And we began that journey. But at the same time, because of the therapy that we were doing, my wife was really doing childhood trauma therapy, especially, and that really began to get a lot of wounds kind of coming up and everything. And it almost added a little bit of fuel to the fire as we tried to figure out our relationship a little bit at that time. It just kind of made it really emotionally charged. And because of our wounds and attachment styles, it became emotionally challenged. Kind of head to head, we're butting heads, if you will, emotionally, to the point where about 4 months after, so early June, she would ultimately put a restraining order on me for emotional safety. I want to make sure everybody knows I never threatened my wife with violence. It was strictly just emotionally based, and she needed the space necessary to get her own head on straight, if you will. And because I was having a hard time doing that, she kind of sought that route. So when that happened, I truly believed that the relationship was essentially over. I really felt like this is it. This is not going to be able to fix this thing, and it's time to just maybe move on and pick up the pieces. But I was fortunate enough before the restraining order happened to come across a woman named Thais Gibson, who's out of Canada, and she has a really incredible program with integrated attachment theory. And because I had started learning about attachment styles and everything else, I was excited to learn that and continue that process. And that's what I decided to do. When the restraining order happened and the relationship ended, I was just diving in head first into this work, so I can hopefully fix myself, figure out how to have a good relationship with somebody. And that's where it kind of led me down the path.
Yeah, I mean, that I think you mentioned like 2, 3 things which I actually want to build upon. That you said that it is basically the emotional attachment maybe have, and then maybe the childhood trauma that could lead to. So, in your opinion, that how these childhood traumas or how these unresolved emotions hinder in developing a healthy relationship?
Yeah. So what I learned about the subconscious was that pretty much 95 to 97% of our decisions are made through the subconscious, and that the conscious cannot really outwill the subconscious. Okay. So even though we know it here, consciously, subconsciously, if it's a different mode going on, then the brain is always going to try to get its needs met immediately, even if it's not necessarily in the healthiest way to do that. But because of the traumas we experienced growing up, a lot of trauma is developed through emotion and repetition. And so these subconscious wounds begin to play out, and we don't always understand them. They're subconscious thoughts that we don't even really think about, but we just go through our lives thinking this is normal, this is the way it is, kind of thing. And sometimes in childhood it worked for us as children to get our needs met, but as adults, because we haven't fixed that as adults, it no longer works anymore. It no longer serves us. But unfortunately, we're kind of stuck in that mindset, and it just, those tapes, if you will play over and over in the subconscious and begin to wear on us. So for me, like, I have a fear of abandonment, let's say. So if I have a fear of abandonment, I'm doing everything I can to hold on to the relationship and fight for the relationship, even at the cost of my own other stuff in my life potentially, right? And so because I haven't healed that wound, if you will, that can cause some real problems and ultimately push somebody away, which it kind of did in the sense with my wife and I at the time,
Yeah, I think that's the main reason a lot of people end up, having all those breakups. So, how do one find out that they are living their emotional traumas and it's not the real problem that they are facing in the relationship?
Yeah, I mean, from my understanding, like a lot of times when we're emotionally triggered and really heightened emotional states, especially when things that shouldn't be that emotionally charged, if you will, the chances are there's some sort of underlying trauma that's being dealt with that's causing that extra emotional step. So I really believe that emotions are really just information, and that emotions, when we're experiencing them, can tell us stuff. And so the key is to tune into that. Okay, so if I'm having positive emotions, even if it's really heightened positive emotions, that's a good thing, right? I want to tune into that. What's making me so happy? Why does it feel so good? On the flip side, if I'm having maybe some anger issues, maybe I'm having some frustration or sadness, or and it's really heightened state there. Why am I angry? Why am I so sad? What is the thoughts that's going on here that's causing me to feel this way? If I can really pay attention to that and then discover what's really the subconscious, thoughts behind it, I can then begin to choose, to operate more in the positive, thoughts than the negative thoughts, and begin to work on that so I can heal that wound, so I can have more positive emotions. Don't we all want a little bit more positive stuff, right?
Yes, that's very true. I mean, you actually pointed out that I think it's all begins with the self-awareness, right? To notice why they are having those anger issues. Maybe like if someone has having the problem of like maybe they get triggered by someone or by their spouse, so they need to focus first of all that what are the things that are triggering them, and then work upon it, right? So it begins with the self-awareness, right?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Being able to look at yourself is the key first and foremost. And a lot of times, unfortunately, we don't want to look at ourselves, right? Again, it's
Yes.
always everybody else's problem and fault and whatever. They're wrong and I'm right type of thing. But when sometimes, when you hit the ground, you hit the bottom, right? That's sometimes when we have to take a real look and say, okay, maybe it is me. And that's really, I was very fortunate to have happen for us, is that because it kind of hit rock bottom, I had to look at it and say, okay, what is going on here? I need to change something. Let me take a look at myself and accept my part of, the experience. And I love what Tice Gibson says, that we're both 100% responsible for our 50% of the relationship. All right. So I'm 100% responsible for my 50%. And that's what I have to look at and take ownership on. And it's okay. I think a lot of times we're especially as men, we're told, like, not to admit we're wrong, not to kind of go there, but that's not really good and healthy. The truth is, a lot of us have wounds. Most of us have wounds. Most of it has some of these issues. So it's okay to accept, hey, you know what? I probably have something going on here that I can look at and work on and change and improve so that I can have a better life. And then I can also have a better life for those around me. I want to be able to have happy relationships with my spouse, my family members, my friends, my coworkers. It kind of overflows into everything once you begin to heal this and do the work.
Yes, I think that's very true. I mean, even I always actually refer to the one of the longest study that was done by Harvard, which was almost it was for 80 years, and they studies people, and what they found is that one attribute that is related to the happiness and success is those people who were more happy, successful, they were good at relationships. So I think that one single factor has a ripple effect on everything, on whatever you do. It actually reflects on all aspects of your life. So I want to ask us this, from your experience, that you've gone through your troubled relationship and you had the problem, during that you had the rough patch in your relationship, and you're also helping lots of couples. So what do you think? What are the most common reasons for relationship failure today?
I think it comes back to a lot of times that subconscious core wounds, right? And I do think
Mhm.
that that's the beginning of it, and that's really the underlying area that we need to work on. So that's the first and foremost part of that, I think. But then there are the 6 core elements of the integrated attachment theory, and I do believe all 6 are important. But if you
Mhm.
ask me for the nucleus, if you
Yeah.
will, the core of it, I do think it's those subconscious wounds that sometimes we just don't know they're there. And it does take that awareness to finally come up and say, okay, wait a second. I see that how I'm doing this completely wrong. I am
Mhm.
definitely messing this up. And that's what I learned through the integrated attachment theory stuff, is that, how to communicate better, how to handle my emotions better, how to set some boundaries and adhere to somebody else's boundaries and have respect for that. When I learned all those different things, now I'm able to have better relationships with my wife and really, again, just overflowing into all the areas of my life with everybody. I'm starting to be able to have better communication, better, connections. And it's just an amazing experience, to be honest with you. I never dreamed I would be able to do this like this. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, yeah. So basically, what you're saying is the subconscious or the hidden, I would say, the traumas in our mind um,
Yeah.
that plays a very crucial role in actually sabotaging our relationship. And when one finds out that what's going on, they are able to uh, heal or their relationship or make it very healthy. So actually, when I was, I mean, I usually have a lot of like talks about my with my friends, or maybe those who want to take some advice from me, that how they can have better relationship. I've studied them that there are lots of silent killers in the relationship. Like silent killers means that are the ones that are small, not the big issue, right? Even in the beginning, you said that when you were having fights, there were small issues, like maybe like some small parenting issue, or maybe some small like financial issues or something, which take a very ugly turn, and which becomes really ugly in the relationship, and which becomes the main reason for the breakup. So do you think that there are some silent killers most of the time, or if there are, then what are those silent killers and how to handle them?
Yeah, I think it could be different for a lot of people, but I feel like, just being misunderstood sometimes, or feeling unheard, not having your feelings validated sometimes, right? The emotions and just the way we sometimes then communicate that to each other. And I think that communication is really a huge factor in a lot of this, because how many people say that, the relationship ended because the communication was bad, or we didn't know how to communicate and this and that. But the problem is because we're speaking different languages sometimes. If I have certain wounds in my life and I have a certain way of presenting information and kind of talking about them, I may be doing, talking this way. Somebody else has different wounds and different ways of perceiving that stuff. So when I say certain things, they hear it a certain way, and to them it triggers maybe the wrong emotion and the wrong feelings and everything else. And now all of a sudden we become combative, and neither one is really listening to the other person. And that's one of the things I learned, is that how do I listen to my wife? How do I really listen, not to defend, right? Because a lot of times when we would have fights in the past, she would be talking and I would be listening to try to defend myself, rather than really listening and trying to understand what she's trying to teach me or talk to me about, and try to understand on her side. So then I would jump over her, right? And I would talk, break in and try to talk and defend, and that would just cause more problems. So one of the things we learned to do is how to communicate differently. And one of the things we love to practice now is what's called holding space, where she gets to talk for 5 or 10 minutes uninterrupted. I then listen to understand and learn from her, not just to defend. Okay, I'm really trying to understand my wife because I love her. I want to know who this person is, right? And then when I get to talk for 5 or 10 minutes, she does the same for me. And then she'll listen and try to learn and understand. And then at the end of that conversation, we both feel more understood. We both feel more validated. We both feel like we have a better understanding of each other. And we come out of there feeling like we've made some ground. We've done some things. We've connected here in a way that we would never have done before, right? When you're arguing and doing this other stuff, you don't feel connected. So when we do it this way, oh my God, it's like a night and day experience. And just that little practice alone has been a game changer for our relationship.
Yeah, that's amazing. Actually, you brought a very good point here. That's the communication. Actually, most of the time, which I've seen, is the lack of communication, or people are actually communicating at a different level, because especially like I would refer here to the book, which is a very, like, I would say, I'm sure a lot of people must have read that book. It's the Men Are From Mars and the Women Are From Venus.
That's right.
Actually, so they actually men and women actually communicate very differently. So just tell us a bit about more on that. That do you feel the difference between the women when they communicate their feelings, or they have certain different demands or something in the relationship as compared to men?
Yeah, I wouldn't say so much as that. I do believe that the attachment style really plays a factor in that, probably more than the male or female, if you will.
Okay.
And sometimes, so like an anxious, preoccupied tends to be very, very clingy, very needy. They really want that relationship. They want to talk about things right away, whereas maybe a dismissive, avoidant, they tend to talk more with their actions. They don't talk as verbally, let's say. So if somebody, let's just say a dismissive, avoidant walks out of the room, to them, they told you that they're angry. They told you, but that really didn't communicate to somebody else.
Yes.
Why are you angry? I really don't understand that stuff. So these are the little things that can happen. So I think once we understand, slow that down a little bit, understand that, okay, dismissive avoidance, my wife would stonewall me, let's say sometimes, where she wouldn't communicate for hours or days at a time. And that can be really difficult, and on the flip side, if I'm an anxious person and I want to talk right now and really open this up, sometimes I have to be patient and let the other person get to a good spot emotionally, so that we can have, again, a healthier conversation. I think at the end of the day, those core wounds are driving us to communicate at the wrong times, sometimes saying things the wrong way. Another thing I really learned how to do is use I statements. So when you did X, I felt Y, not you made me feel, right? So if I say you made me feel, that feels more of attack. But if I say, hey, when you didn't do the dishes or something, I felt like disrespected, or I felt unappreciated. Okay, that's different than saying you made me feel unappreciated because you never help with the housework or something. So communicating different like that has been huge,
Yes. I think the simple way of just the communicating in a very different way will help you build the relationship. I guess that's really the small simple tips, I would just say, that can actually save the relationship. I would also you mentioned here that this, like, maybe some people ask or some people expect, right, from the relationship, that okay, that person needs to do this, and they were expecting it, and then when their expectations are not met, they basically feel bad or something. So what would you say that how do unspoken expectations and assumptions affect the longevity of relationship?
Yeah, I mean, so neither side is usually mind readers, right? I don't know too many women that are mind readers and vice versa. I'm certainly not. So a lot of times we assume the other person knows what we're thinking, knows what we're
Yeah.
doing or something. And maybe I mentioned it once and then they didn't pay attention and now it's gone on for a while. And I feel like I said something, but truthfully, sometimes we have to repeat and kind of go there. But also when we say it, how we say it can make a big difference, right? So I really feel like if something's very important, it's important to sit down face to face and have that real time to communicate, not just maybe saying some things as we're going through the day and shouting it, hey, can you pick your clothes up off the floor? And then hours later, that hasn't been done. Well, maybe I didn't hear it. Maybe I got busy, maybe certain things, but I feel then disrespected, right? Because, oh, you didn't do what I asked you and stuff like that. So it's really important to kind of take the time, understand each other, give each other a little grace. But then if it is valuable and important, and it is a boundary that we want to set and that is very important to us, to communicate that, hey, when you pick up this is for my wife and I, right? My wife tends to sometimes leave her clothes on the floor in the bedroom, and when she picks them up, it really makes me feel appreciated. It really makes me feel respected and good. And I let her know that. And now now that she knows that, she goes, oh, if I want my husband to feel good and feel like I love him and appreciate him, if I just pick up the clothes sometimes, that helps him feel that way. Then she's more inclined to do that. But if I yell at her and say, you need to just pick up your clothes, it's killing me, it's pissing me off or whatever, then that's not the same approach. So really, how we approach it and letting the other person know, like, this is how I feel when that happens. And this is why it's affecting me. Sometimes if our spouse cares about us and they know that, then they're going to want to make the adjustment as much as possible. Now, sometimes we have to reiterate, we have to sometimes do it over and over again because we have habits, we have certain things like that, right? That it may just be something I do subconsciously again, that I'm not aware of. So it may take some time to make that change, but as long as you see some progress, so long as you're having those discussions and you see that person is working towards that, then that's a positive step. That's a very positive thing that the other person's willing and trying their best to kind of accommodate and work with you to, make those adjustments.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that you brought, that it's all about, communicating again, that, what you are expecting. And then not only expecting, how it's going to affect. I mean, I love the way you said that, how it will make you feel. Even just a small act of, picking up the clothes will make you feel, that way. So you can just say that, oh, if you do the dishes, it will make me feel appreciated. So it's very clear sentence instead of just saying, oh, why didn't you do the dishes? So I think that makes a lot of difference, the way we actually just make a sentence and you communicate to them. Here again, I know that you actually talked a lot about this attachment theory, but could you tell a bit more about this? And what is this attachment theory, and what are you mentioned there is 6, I think, component of it. So I would appreciate it if you can just share what are these.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So attachment theory has been around really since the 70s for the most part. It's kind of started in the 50s, but really took up some good space in the 70s, and it's been around so for like 50 years now. And what it is basically, how do we attach in relationships? And there's 4 major attachment styles. Number 1 is a secure person, somebody who has good communication skills, sets healthy boundaries, emotionally balanced. They know how to kind of handle themselves, and they're good communicators. That's the kind of person that we all want to be and get to, right? Unfortunately, there's probably a smaller amount of them than we like, but that's the goal, is to be more secure in the way we handle the relationships. On the other side, there's 3 other attachment styles that are not so healthy. Number 1 is what's called an anxious preoccupied. These people tend to really value relationships and connection, and they're very tend to be kind of clingy sometimes, can be too needy. They really outsource their stability, if you will, by making the other person, kind of regulate them for them and stuff. So, but they just become more clingy, if you will, very communicative and high anxiety with that. They want to, get things done right away. Essentially, sometimes they'll get in a relationship and within 2 weeks they're already in love and married, right? So, whereas on the other side of that coin is maybe what's called a dismissive avoidant. Dismissive avoidants have a hard time connecting to their emotions sometimes. They tend to be more isolated. They like a lot of space for themselves, and they'll come out and play for a little bit, but then they want to go back and hide for a little while. And they just like a lot of space. They're fear of being trapped or fear of being, overly committed to something. And so they kind of land there. In between that is what's called a fearful avoidant. Fearful avoidance kind of swing both sides. They lean towards the anxious sometimes. they can lean towards dismissive. So they kind of go back and forth. Maybe one week they're in love and everything's good and they're happy and feel comfortable. And the next week they're telling you, leave me alone. I need some space, like, get away from me and stuff. So they can be more emotionally kind of swinging between the pendulum. So all three of those attachment styles can be challenging, and they all have their own core wounds to deal with. They all have some of the elements that they need to work on to heal. Then what we have is called the integrated attachment theory. And that's what Thais Gibson out of Canada created, and what I really love. And those are the 6 core elements to then fix the attachment style. So when we have that unhealthy attachment style, the integrated attachment theory will then give you some elements to begin to heal that attachment style and some pointers to work on.
Yeah, that's like very detailed. Is this different types of styles, So how one can recognize that which style are they in, and how they can adjust their style?
Yeah, I mean, it takes a little time, but you can, first of all, I have a quick quiz. You can go to my website at makeyourrelationshipfail.com, and you can take an attachment style quiz, which will give you a pretty good idea of what your attachment style is. I don't know that here's the thing. Don't lock into the idea of whether you're this attachment style or that attachment style. I think that helps us get a good picture of where you may land. But at the core of it really is, what are my core wounds? That's what I really need to learn and work on, because it's those core wounds that's going to help me begin to heal. Understanding which area I may fit in more than this or more than that, that's okay. That gives me an overall picture. But at the end of the day, that's not as important as what are really my core wounds that I'm dealing with. What are my fears? Do I have a fear of abandonment? Do I have a fear of being alone? Do I have a fear of being unsafe? Or do I have a fear of being trapped? All these different types of wounds that we can have. That's the key to it all. But yeah, you can go to my website if you just want to take a quick exam to figure it out. Go to My Relationship Fail or makeyourrelationshipfail.com. Either one will work, and you can take a quick quiz there.
Okay, that's very generous of you to actually share that. So people who are listening, they can actually take the quiz from his website, which is actually, you can see in the ticker. Okay, so I also actually want to ask that there is a myth, I would say, that there are more, if two people are more similar in their they have common interest or something, or they have shared vision, they have shared interest, so they are more successful. So what do you think? Is it true, or is it just the opposite attracts type of thing that it works, which makes the relationship work better?
Yeah, I mean, I think for the most part, when we're wounded, a lot of times we're going to choose the other side of us that is kind of opposite than what we are, because that's the part that we're lacking. So if I have certain, if I'm maybe a little too clingy, I may appreciate somebody who's more isolated and happy to be alone, where, that's a side of me that I'm not exploring as much, but it kind of interests me, and vice versa. Somebody who's, maybe isolated, they like to be alone, maybe look at me, or somebody who's more outgoing and friendly and connected, and they're attracted to that, because we're attracted to the opposites, right? In that case, it's like the opposites attract. So in a sense, that does kind of occur. As far as the core elements, though, of our beliefs or our goals in life, do we want children? Do we want, where do we want to live? Stuff like that. That, I think, is very important to have some very common ground. Because I think when those things are really not in line, that can really be a problem as far as, moving forward in the relationship. If I'm, wanting to, move somewhere differently or something, and somebody else is absolutely adamant not into that, then I think that was a problem. So I think it's very important to choose that. But unfortunately, I think because of the core wounds, until we learn what those core wounds are, a lot of times we do choose people who can be opposite from us. They kind of appear, and we're choosing that person because we're lacking that on our own. And so that does happen a lot, more times than not, for sure.
Yeah, you explained it very well, actually. Yes, because a lot of time we hear that, that this opposite attract, and this is, but I think the main thing that you mentioned here is that they could be mismatched, or they could be the opposite of the interest, or there could be some different type of interest. But what matters is, I think, the core values and beliefs should actually match. Otherwise, there will be a big mismatch.
For sure.
Yeah. So what would you advise that, that maybe what do you recommend that how one can actually do some daily habits or practices which can make their relationship healthy and happy?
Yeah. So for me, I like to work on the 6 core elements of the integrated attachment theory. And so those 6 core elements are your core wounds, your needs, your emotions, your boundaries, your communication skills, and your behaviors. So those are 6 things that we can then work on. So every day we wake up, we can, we can go through that and figure out, okay, what do I need to work on today? Maybe it's a couple at a time here, but we don't want to overwhelm ourselves. But essentially, so today I may wake up and do some exercises that may help me, handle my core wounds a little bit. Maybe I do a workbook that helps me understand my needs a little bit more. Maybe I have a new practice of going to the gym and changing some of my behaviors. So maybe now I like to exercise more, or I do some more positive things in my life that, again, begin to have a powerful effect. But everybody's got to choose or find out what works for them a little bit. Meditation, prayer, relationship with God, whatever, all those things. Again, some exercise. I love hiking in the woods. I live in New England and in the U.S. here, and there's some really great, mountains we can just go hiking on and get in the woods and kind of do that. Everybody has to find a little bit of their own thing. I personally, I love to just again, hiking is great. Exercising for me has been an important part of my life, my entire life, for sure.
Yeah, I think that these are very good points to start with. And I would just say that everything requires some efforts, right? Like in life, even when we are studying, we do put a lot of effort in that. When we are in career, we do put a lot of effort to build a career. So relationship is also not an exception. We need to put effort, and just like this, we need to study. We need to study ourselves. We need to study our spouse, and then work accordingly. But there was one thing that actually it's coming to my mind, that what about those that sometimes people are stuck in a toxic relationship, right? Where maybe one spouse is dominating, or one spouse is toxic, right? Or narcissist kind of thing. What would you think that how one can actually identify that, okay, they are, because everyone tries to build the relationship, right? But how to actually find out that mismatch or imbalance in the relationship?
Yeah, I mean, that sometimes is just an awareness that comes about through your day, through your life, through your relationship and stuff. And then the key with that is that one of the things I've learned and know that we can't really change other people. The only thing we can do is change ourselves. So if I recognize there's some issues, then it's important that I then begin to do the work, and I can invite them to do some work with me. But if they're not willing to do the work, that's on them. That doesn't mean that should stop me from doing the work, because if I do the work and I learn how to get healthier and I kind of find my weaknesses and begin to strengthen those up and everything else, I can put myself in a much better position emotionally, mentally, better skills on how to handle everything. And a lot of times that alone will help the relationship. One person in the relationship doing the work can actually bring the other person along, and that can really help change the dynamics of the relationship alone. Obviously, at some point, we like to have our spouse join us, or whoever it is we're dealing with. We like to see the other person do some work as well, because when we both do the work, that's the home run. Then it's really an amazing journey, and you're often really running. But at the very least, if you recognize there's issues, start to do the work and start to wake up and say, okay, how can we fix this? How can I fix this? My side of it. Again, I'm only responsible for my side, but how can I do the work to fix my side of this thing? So at least I know that I'm showing up for my 50% of the relationship. I'm giving that 100% to my 50% of the relationship. And then, if the other person really doesn't come along, sometimes if I may outgrow them, that does happen, unfortunately, right? Sometimes a person outgrows them, and that other person, if they do stay unhealthy, then it may be time to separate and ultimately move on in that relationship. But that other person kind of made that choice to stay in that negative zone instead of saying, yeah, I want to do some work as well. But and sometimes, that's what they need to wake up to. Sometimes they do need that kind of like hit the ground, hit the bottom, if you will, before they start to wake up and realize, oh my God, I'm losing the person that I love here, and they're now leaving me or something. And it's like, oh man, I need to do this work. But hopefully you don't want to get to that bottom, but it does happen sometimes. But at the end of the day, you got to make the choice for yourself. You cannot assume the other person's, we hope that they do the work with us, but even if they don't, you got to do it for yourself.
Yeah, I think that's very important, that as you said, that we cannot change other person. We can only change ourselves. And I would just say that a lot of people that I have seen, that sometimes they do all the work, and sometimes the other person is completely not willing to do the homework, and they're not agreeing, or they're not willing to compromise or for the relationship. Then I think that's the time that one person needs to realize that they need to actually protect their boundaries, their mental health as well. So it should not be at the cost of their mental health or physical health. And they're the one, I think, when the person needs to decide that whether it's a right to actually be like stay in the relationship or let it go. So unfortunately, like a lot of people do that, that they let go of the relationship, but sometimes it is really needed, but sometimes it can be worked to actually make the relationship better. So I think there are always hope, there are always chances to actually work on the relationship, because I think it's all about, as you said, it it begins with the self-awareness. First of all, we need to realize that what is the problem, and not throwing everything on the other partner. Just first of all, we need to understand, where do you stand, what do you want in the life, what is the problem, where is it happening. Once you do your homework, and then you can start, working on it, right? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, absolutely. No, 100%. I love that. And that's exactly what I learned through all this stuff here. When my wife and I split, I made up my mind to do the work. It didn't matter. I was going to continue to do the work. I knew that I would have a healthy relationship with somebody. I didn't know it was going to be her again. I didn't know we'd have a second chance, if you will, but I was just going to move on and have a healthy relationship with somebody. And so for me, the breakup actually worked out to be the best thing that ever happened for both of us, because that's what we did need, both of us, to get an awareness and realize, okay, we both need to do some work and make some changes. We both had unhealthy, things that we were doing. Again, it was mostly childhood based and trauma and stuff that was stuck in our brains, if you will. But because of the awareness, I was able to do some work. She was able to do some work. And then when we did have a chance to come back together, we were now in a much healthier position, emotionally, mentally, and everything else, to actually have a really healthy, happy relationship. And so it's been a gift to be able to say, wow, now I always say, like, if I had done the work and she didn't do the work, though, that probably wouldn't have worked out, because I would have came back in and been like, yeah, I'm not really attracted. I don't want to go there again. Or vice versa. If she had done the work and I didn't, then she might have moved on and had a relationship with somebody else, right? And I would have been like, yeah, I should have done the work. Or if we both didn't do the work, neither one of us did the work, we would have stayed stuck in that, that mediocre relationship. Like we would, and then maybe it would have ended eventually again, right? So that's where that would have landed. So the only thing that helps is that at least somebody do the work. But if both do the work, man, you're off and running. There's unlimited potential for reconciliation, and now the opportunity to have a really great relationship, whether it's with the person you're with now, or again, if that is over and it's just unsalvageable. Sometimes that happens. Two people just maybe they don't belong together anymore, and that relationship has run its course. But at least if you do the work, that you're gonna have another chance to have a relationship with somebody again. And when you do, this time it could be much greater. It could be the best relationship you've ever had. If you have new skills, you have new tools. And that's the thing. My wife and I have new tools. We didn't have the tools before. We loved each other before. And that, a lot of times people love each other, but they just don't know how to do it. And that's what we learned, is like, we can love each other, but if we don't know how to communicate, we don't have those boundaries, we don't have all that stuff, those tools, then sometimes you can love each other all you want, but it still ends, it breaks, and it's heartbreaking. That's the worst thing in the world, is when a relationship ends when you love each other, but you don't have the tools necessary. So you got to get some tools that will help you have the healthy relationship. And it does take some work, it does just take some work, but it takes a lot more work sometimes being single and being alone and all that other stuff, so either way, you got to have to do some work somewhere,
Yeah, that's very true. I know that we can actually talk a lot about this, because this is such a vast topic, and a lot of people are actually interested also to learn more about this. So before I actually end this show, what one advice would you like to give to our audience today to have a healthy relationship?
Yeah, I just want to say, first and foremost, I feel like if, for me, through my own experience, that I truly believe that sometimes the relationship, when it fails, when you're going through that heartbreak, when you're really struggling, don't give up hope. First and foremost, there's always a chance that things can turn around. Okay. So I want you to know that just because it looks really bad right now, that doesn't mean, a month or 2 or 3 months, whatever it might be, that can't turn around. But with that said, when you're at that critical spot, it is a time to take some stock, look at yourself, and be willing to humble yourself and take some stock in you, take some ownership in your own behaviors and the way you're doing things, and be willing to change, be willing to learn and say, okay, I want to do this right. And just know that when you do that yes, it will pay dividends. It's a guarantee, so have faith that the work you put into that is going to actually pay off when you get that next opportunity. And you never know, again, whether it's going to be your spouse coming back to you and you guys both being able to do that, or again, if you have to move on, at least with somebody new, you've got some tools in your belt and you're going to have a happier relationship there. So you can't lose when you do the work. That's at the end of the day. That's my thought. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's wonderful advice. I think one thing is that they need to have the right tools that you mentioned. That they know they it's easy to fall in love, but it is difficult to actually stay in love. Right? It's a choice. It's always a choice, and it's a decision to stay in love because. Like when somebody falls in love, it's just all because of all the neurotransmitters and the high emotions and everything. That is easy. But
Yeah.
the hard part comes after that when all the those neurotransmitters goes down, and then you see the reality, and then you start living the life. I think that is when one needs more help, and that is when they need the right tools to maintain and sustain the relationship. So thank you so much for the wonderful advice. So lastly, just tell our audience that how they can reach out to you.
Yeah, if you want to reach out to me at all, please go to my website at
Okay.
makeyourrelationshipfail.com
Okay.
or
Okay. This.
myrelationshipfail.com.
Okay.
Okay, you
Okay.
can go to either one of those two, and that will get you to my website. When you go through that, I always like to have people join the personal development school from my website, and that is Tice Gibson School. There's a wealth of incredible information there. You can spend a lifetime learning in this thing.
Mhm.
It's amazing. But when you go through my website to join the school, I'm going to give you a free session with me. We're going to talk about your situation. We're going to see what we can do to point you in the right direction so you can start getting on the right track and get some healing and start getting these tools necessary to really have that relationship you're looking for. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's so generous of you to actually give them the free sessions and all those tools, and especially this the quiz and everything. So I think they will really learn a lot from you. And thank you for sharing such great wisdom and knowledge and these insights to sustain and maintain a healthy relationship. I hope our audience must have learned a lot from you. So thank you so much, and have a great rest of the day.
And Bryan, thank you so much for having me on the show. Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.